Have you ever pondered the significance of language translation in our interconnected world? It's not merely about swapping words from one language to another. It's about building bridges between cultures, opening doors to new realms of understanding, and fostering global unity. Language translation is the unsung hero that powers many aspects of our lives. In business, for instance, it's the secret ingredient that spices up international trade and collaboration. By breaking down language barriers, businesses can reach broader markets, establish stronger partnerships, and turn cultural diversity into a competitive advantage. That's the power of translation at work. In the realm of education, translation is the key that unlocks a world of knowledge. It brings foreign literature to our fingertips, making it possible for us to learn from the wisdom of other cultures and broaden our intellectual horizons. It's thanks to translation that we can delve into the depths of Dostoevsky's novels or marvel at the genius of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, even if we don't speak a word of Russian or Spanish. And let's not forget about international relations. Here too, translation plays a pivotal role. It ensures clear communication between nations, helping to prevent misunderstandings that could lead to conflicts. It also facilitates diplomacy, enabling world leaders to negotiate, cooperate, and work towards a better, more peaceful world. Behind every successful translation, there's an unsung hero, the translator. They are the ones who take on the mammoth task of conveying not just words, but the emotions, nuances, and cultural context that those words carry. They are the ones who help us see the world through the eyes of others, fostering empathy and understanding. So if you've ever been intrigued by the art of translation, particularly English to Portuguese, stick around for some useful tips. Because translation is not just about knowing two languages, it's about understanding two cultures, two worldviews, and that's a skill worth honing. The first tip in our journey of translation mastery is understanding the context. Now, what do we mean by context? Picture this. You're reading a novel set in the Roaring '20s and stumble upon the phrase, "the bee's knees." If you're not familiar with the slang of that era, you might think it's referring to some insect's body part. But in fact, it was a popular saying that meant the best. This is a perfect example of how understanding the context can completely change the meaning of words or phrases. In the realm of translation, context is king. It's not just about the sentences that come before or after a particular phrase, it's about the entire cultural, historical, and social backdrop against which the text was written. It's about why the author chose to use a certain word, a certain phrase, or a certain tone. It's about the feelings and emotions the author wanted to evoke. How does this translate to our English to Portuguese journey? Let's take the English word home. In a simple sense, it could be translated to casa in Portuguese. But if the text talks about the emotional connection to one's birthplace, lar might be a more appropriate choice. Similarly, saudade, a unique Portuguese word that encapsulates a deep emotional state of nostalgic longing for something or someone that one loves and which is absent, might be translated as miss or longing in English, but neither truly captures the depth of emotion contained within saudade. So, understanding the context is paramount. It can affect the choice of words and phrases in the target language, and it can make the difference between a bland, literal translation and one that truly resonates with the reader. Remember, a good translator doesn't merely translate words, they translate meanings. They dive deep into the text, understand the nuances, and then recreate the same experience in another language. It's an art, a craft, and a science all rolled into one, and that's what makes it such a fascinating journey. Remember, a good translator doesn't merely translate words, they translate meanings. Next up is mastering the grammar. This is fundamental to producing an accurate translation. Now, let's dive into the heart of language, grammar. It's the skeleton that gives structure to language, the set of rules that governs how we speak, write, and understand. Whether English or Portuguese, grammar is the framework that holds the language together. In the world of translation, a deep understanding of grammar in both languages is paramount. It's not just about knowing where to place a comma or when to use a semicolon. It's about understanding the rules and structure of both English and Portuguese, and being able to move seamlessly between the two. Let's talk about some of the common grammatical differences between English and Portuguese. One of the most noticeable differences is the placement of adjectives. In English, adjectives usually come before the noun they're describing. For example, red car. In Portuguese, it's typically the other way around, caro vermelho, literally translating to car red. Another key difference lies in verb tenses. English has 12 verb tenses, while Portuguese has a whopping 17. Portuguese also uses gender and agreement rules in a way that English does not. For instance, Portuguese adjectives must match the gender and number of the nouns they modify. These are just a few examples, but they illustrate the point. The grammatical rules of English and Portuguese are quite different, and understanding these differences is crucial for producing accurate translations. Remember, the goal of translation is not to produce a word-for-word replica of the original text. It's about conveying the same meaning, the same message in a different language. And to do that, you need to master the grammar of both languages. So, keep studying, keep practicing, and don't be afraid to ask questions or seek help when you need it. Grammar can be tricky, but it's also fascinating. It's a window into the soul of a language, and mastering it is one of the most rewarding aspects of learning a new language. Grammar mastery is a must. It forms the backbone of any accurate translation. Our third tip is about respecting cultural nuances. Language is more than just words and grammar. It's a reflection of a culture's history, values, and worldview. When translating English to Portuguese, it's not enough to be proficient in both languages. A great translator also understands and respects the cultural nuances that underpin each language. Let's take idioms, for instance. The English phrase break a leg is an expression of good luck, but if you translate it literally to Portuguese, it might leave your audience baffled and wondering why you're wishing them physical harm. In Portuguese, a similar sentiment might be expressed as muita merda, which literally means a lot of poop. Yes, you heard it right, but in the theatrical world it's a way of wishing good luck. Another example is the English phrase, it's raining cats and dogs. Now in Portugal or Brazil, no one would understand this literal translation. Instead, they might say está chovendo canavetes, which translates to it's raining pocket knives. Not quite the same imagery, right? But it conveys the same meaning, a heavy downpour. Cultural nuances also extend to social norms and values. For instance, the concept of personal space or the idea of being on time might differ greatly between English-speaking and Portuguese-speaking cultures. If you're translating a guidebook or a business document, these are the kind of nuances you need to be aware of. Respecting cultural nuances also means being sensitive to potential taboos or sensitive topics. What might be a casual topic of conversation in an English-speaking country could be a major faux pas in a Portuguese-speaking country, and vice versa. In short, when you're translating, you're not just conveying words from one language to another. You're bridging cultures. You're fostering understanding. You're enabling communication between people who might otherwise be unable to connect. So remember, always be mindful of cultural nuances. They can make or break your translation. On to our fourth tip. Employing the right vocabulary. When translating from one language to another, it's not just about swapping words. It's about conveying the same meaning, tone, and emotion. Picture this. You're trying to translate a phrase that's as simple as apple of my eye. In English, it refers to something or someone you cherish. But if you translate it word for word in Portuguese, it might not make sense. This is where vocabulary comes into play. You have to pick the right words that not only make sense in the target language, but also carry the same sentiment. Using the wrong word can change the meaning of a sentence dramatically, sometimes even reversing it. It's like playing a high-stakes game of word association where the rules change with each language. So remember, when translating, don't just think about what the words mean, think about what they represent. Word choice is key. It can dramatically alter the message you're trying to convey. Our fifth and final tip is proofreading. Now you might think you've nailed it after translating, but hold on. There's one last critical step, proofreading. It's your final hurdle and your best friend. Proofreading is like the quality assurance phase in translation. It's where you cross-check your work, seeking out and fixing any tiny mistakes that might have slipped through. These could be anything, a misspelled word, a misplaced punctuation mark, or even an incorrectly used term. Think of it this way, proofreading is your safety net, catching you when you fall. It ensures your translation is not only error-free, but also accurately conveys the original message. It's about polishing your work, making it shine, and presenting the best version of your translation. And remember, even the most experienced translators proofread their work. It's a hallmark of professionalism and a key to success. So, never underestimate the power of proofreading. It's your final defense against mistakes. Let's quickly recap what we've learned today. We've journeyed through the fascinating world of English to Portuguese translation, uncovering the top 5 skills every interpreter should strive to possess. First, we delved into the importance of understanding the context. Remember, each word carries its own weight in a sentence, but it's the context that gives it the true meaning. Understanding the context is like having a map in the wilderness. It guides your translation and ensures you're on the right path. Next, we tackled the intricacies of grammar. Mastering grammar is akin to mastering the rules of a game. With a firm grasp of English and Portuguese grammar, you can play the translation game seamlessly, always scoring points for accuracy. We then moved on to the respect for cultural nuances. Culture breathes life into language, and as interpreters we must respect these nuances. By doing so, we not only translate words but also feelings, traditions, and underlying meanings. It's like painting a picture. The colors represent the words, but it's the cultural nuances that provide the depth and texture. Our fourth point of discussion was the employment of the right vocabulary. The power of vocabulary cannot be overstated. It's the difference between a good translation and a great one. Think of it as the spices in a meal. The right choice can enhance the flavor, while the wrong one can leave a bitter taste. Finally, we emphasize the essentiality of proofreading. It's the final step, but by no means the least important. Proofreading is your safety net. It catches any slips or falls before they reach the reader. Keep these tips in mind, and you'll be well on your way to becoming a successful English to Portuguese translator. Remember, translation is not just about changing words from one language to another, it's about conveying meaning and bridging cultures.